It always began with a familiar soundtrack, clattering shoes racing across polished floors, corridor echoes bouncing off brick walls, and the soft shuffle of exercise books being stacked on desks. In the 1980s, this was simply the rhythm of a school morning, a kind of organized chaos that somehow felt completely normal. You could slip into a classroom buzzing with whispered conversations, desk tapping, and last-minute homework swaps, and no one batted an eye. Teachers walked in with a calm acceptance, letting half the room settle itself before lessons truly began. And here's the surprising part. Many of the everyday behaviors we saw as ordinary would be banned instantly in today's tightly managed schools. Back then, it felt like harmless freedom. Today, it reads like a different universe. Yet this easy, swirling energy shaped our memories and set the stage for what followed. Step into a typical 1980s classroom, and the first thing you notice is the scale of it all. 30, sometimes even 35 pupils squeezed into neat rows, each desk carved with the quiet history of previous years. At the front stood a chalkboard that left a permanent dusting across the teacher's sleeves, and beside it, an overhead projector humming softly, its transparency sheets curling at the edges. Registers were handwritten, taken with a rhythm that felt almost ceremonial, and lessons unfolded with a mixture of planning and instinct. Teachers didn't rely on endless guidelines or digital systems. They relied on experience, presence, and a firm glance when needed. Rules certainly existed, but they were simpler, broader, and left room for interpretation. Supervision was lighter too, not careless, just shaped by a belief that children could navigate minor moments on their own. Back then, the priority was maintaining basic order, keeping lessons moving, and ensuring everyone left the classroom a little wiser than they entered. Today's schools operate with structured, safeguarding, detailed policies, and layers of oversight. It isn't better or worse, simply different, and understanding that difference helps us appreciate why so many forgotten behaviors once slipped quietly under the radar. There was always a moment, just after the teacher turned to the board, when the classroom seemed to come alive in its own quiet way. A whisper would travel from one desk to another, threading its way across the room like a secret current. These whispering chains were rarely about anything important, yet they carried the thrill of shared mischief. Nobody shouted, nobody disrupted. It was simply the background hum of a class, finding its own rhythm while the lesson continued. Then there were the novelty sweets that appeared the moment break ended. Pupils would slide tiny packets beneath the desk lid, swapping colors or flavors with the sort of diplomacy the world's greatest negotiators would envy. Alongside this came the gentle desk-tapping rhythms, a light percussion created with fingertips, rulers, or pencil ends. It wasn't loud enough to break the flow of a lesson, just enough to remind everyone that childhood energy was always waiting to spill out. Trading stickers, pencil toppers, and scented erasers became a full economy of its own. Entire collections changed hands between maths questions, and the teacher's raised eyebrow usually meant, finish your work first, then carry on. And of course, tucked inside many workbooks, there was often a comic folded neatly between pages, waiting for a moment when the teacher's attention shifted elsewhere. Why did teachers let so much of this slide? Perhaps because they recognized these small behaviors for what they were: harmless expressions of personality, friendship, and the need for tiny freedoms within long school days. It added charm, warmth, and humanity to the classroom. And as we look back, it becomes clear that these small, unspoken allowances shaped the atmosphere of 1980s school life more than any written rule ever could. Step outside into a 1980s school playground, and the first thing that strikes you is the sheer scale of the freedom. Children launched into massive games that seemed to involve half the school, with rules that shifted every 5 minutes, and no one entirely sure who was winning. It didn't matter. What mattered was the movement, the laughter, the breathless sprinting across tarmac and grass as friendships formed and dissolved in an instant. Today, such sprawling, unstructured games would be carefully monitored. Back then, they were simply part of growing up. Climbing frames and tall apparatuses stood proudly at the edge of the yard, used with a confidence that feels almost daring now. Pupils swung, balanced, and leaped with minimal supervision, trusting their instincts and learning their limits through experience. Muddy knees were practically a badge of honor, and in winter, when fingertips turned pink from the cold, the sound of the school bell carried across the yard like a rescue signal, calling everyone back indoors. Roaming was another quiet freedom. Pupils drifted between playground, field, and corridor without anyone questioning where they were headed. You could wander to the far corner of the field to talk with a friend, then reappear 10 minutes later, as if nothing had happened. And who could forget the legendary Lost Property Mountain, a chaotic pile of jumpers, gloves, lunchboxes, and mystery items that pupils rummaged through for amusement. Sometimes things were swapped purely for fun, a quirky ritual that made the playground feel like its own little marketplace. Looking back, this outdoor freedom seems almost unbelievable. Yet it was these moments, untethered, unsupervised, joyfully messy, that gave 1980s school life its unforgettable charm. If the playground was the heart of school life, then the corridors were its restless, echoing pulse. The moment the bell rang, pupils spilled into long stretches of polished flooring that practically invited a gentle slide. Shoes skimmed across the surface, arms stretched for balance, friends laughing as they glided a few extra feet before straightening up at the sight of a passing teacher. It wasn't reckless, just part of the unspoken choreography of getting from one lesson to the next. Queues formed outside classrooms, turning into lively little gatherings. Pupils chatted about weekend plans, swapped stationery, compared sticker books, or traded the latest classroom gossip, all while inching forward at a pace dictated by whoever stood closest to the door. Half the fun was the anticipation. The other half was seeing how much socializing you could squeeze into those few minutes. Then there were the spontaneous races, not official ones, of course, just a quiet competition to beat the bell or reach the far end of the corridor first. A sideways glance, a subtle nod, and suddenly 2 pupils were speedwalking with comic determination. Teachers often sighed at the noise and bustle, but most allowed it, recognizing it as harmless energy between structured lessons. And in many ways, these corridors of controlled chaos stitched the school day together, offering moments of laughter and connection that still linger in memory. Looking back, it's easy to imagine that teachers simply didn't notice the whispered conversations, the wandering pupils, or the sticker trades happening under the desk. But the truth is far more meaningful. Teachers saw far more than we realized. They just chose their battles differently. They understood that children needed pockets of freedom, small sparks of imagination, and a bit of harmless chaos to grow into confident, capable adults. A perfectly silent, tightly controlled classroom wasn't their goal. A curious, engaged one was. There was a quiet trust woven into the fabric of the era. Teachers believed pupils could sort out minor disagreements, manage their own play, and learn from small mistakes without constant intervention. Independence wasn't taught through lessons. It was absorbed through everyday moments of figuring things out yourself. And while today's schools prioritize structure, safety, and policy, all with good reason, the 1980s embraced a different philosophy. It wasn't neglect. It wasn't carelessness. It was a belief that childhood should carry a little room to breathe, that children were at their best when they were allowed to be themselves. This unspoken understanding shaped the atmosphere of the time, preparing us for the world in subtle but lasting ways. Looking at today's schools, it's clear how much the landscape has changed. Modern classrooms run on structure, careful routines, and layers of thoughtful safeguarding, all designed to keep children protected and supported. Yet in that shift, a little of the old spontaneity has slipped away. The creativity born from unplanned games, the small adventures found in corridors, the free-flowing energy of a less supervised playground, those moments feel like treasures from another world now. Wait, if you grew up in Old Britain, you'll want to see what I couldn't include in this video. I've posted the deeper story and extra memories on WhatsApp channel. The link is in the description. Join us there. But here's the comforting truth. We didn't just live through that era. We embraced it joyfully, and those memories still shape us. For more of these unbelievable memories, tap the video on your screen. The 1970s stories are something else. Don't forget to subscribe.